The man shot a rabbit and was preparing to head down the mountain when he suddenly spotted a dead wild dog. At first, he thought it was his lucky day and considered taking the dog home to cook it, but he noticed the dog's death looked unusual. As he examined the dog's corpse, he saw its internal organs had already rotted away, as if infected by some terrible virus. At the same moment, the dog's blood splashed onto the hunter's face. Meanwhile, the story shifts to the main plot. 5 college students about to graduate agreed to drive up the mountain for a vacation trip together. In the front seat were Jeff and his girlfriend Marcy, while in the back were Paul and Karen, who were still in a flirtatious stage, and the single Bert. Soon they drove to the foot of the mountain, saw a convenience store there, and decided to go buy some supplies. Paul sees a cute little boy at the entrance and reaches out to greet him. But unexpectedly, the boy grabs his hand and bites him. The scream quickly alerted the store owner, Tommy, who first scolded the boy, then apologized to Paul, explaining that his son suffered from a severe manic disorder, and the whole town avoided him. Although Paul was very angry about being bitten for no reason, considering the boy was just a child, he didn't make a big deal out of it and went alone to the river to clean the wound briefly. Meanwhile, an elderly store clerk showed them products, saying the items on the shelves were all antiques, each nearly 100 years old. The young people looked at the cheap-looking vases and knew without a doubt the old man was trying to scam them. Seeing they won't fall for it, the old man then recommends a hunting rifle, saying it could be used for protection and to shoot some rabbits. Bert, always interested in guns, bought one on the spot. But just as they finished paying and were about to leave, Tommy suddenly stopped Bert. It turned out Bert had secretly slipped a chocolate bar into his pocket without paying, signaling that Tommy had already lost trust in him. Soon the group reached their destination, a dilapidated cabin deep in the woods. Jeff said the cabin belonged to his cousin, and they could stay there without worry. After they assigned rooms, Marcy eagerly got intimate with Jeff, while Paul and Karen decided to go relax by the river. The single Bert, with nothing better to do, wanted to try out his new shotgun and perhaps hunt some game in the woods. Paul and Karen then arrived at the lake and began relaxing, enjoying the sun. Paul and Karen were actually childhood sweethearts who had grown up together, and they had mutual feelings, but hadn't officially defined their relationship yet. Paul planned to confess to Karen during this trip. Meanwhile, Bert was aiming at a squirrel, but his poor marksmanship let the squirrel escape every time. Chasing the squirrel deeper into the woods, he saw movement in the grass and fired instantly. To his horror, a man's agonized scream followed. Bert hurried over to check, and this person was the very man from the film's opening scene. Now his face was covered in red sores, appearing as if afflicted by some strange disease. Bert intended to carry the man back to the cabin, but feared viral infection, so he told the man to wait there while he fetched a doctor from town. The man, however, was uncooperative and insisted on going with him. Worried the man might report the accidental shooting, Bert panicked and pulled the trigger, hoping to scare him off. Weakened by the infection and the wound from Bert's shot, the man lost all mobility and collapsed into a pit behind him. After returning to camp, Bert didn't tell his companions what had just happened. After all, in these remote woods, if a homeless man died, no one would likely notice. Night fell, and to pass the time, they decided each would tell a scary story. Paul recounted that in his childhood, a horrific murder happened at his hometown's gymnasium. Back then, everyone was tied up by a madman and arranged in a large circle. The madman smashed their heads with a hammer and even dismembered all the bodies with an axe. Even more terrifying, after dismembering them, the killer used the severed limbs as bowling balls and played with them all night. Luckily, the police caught the killer, but shockingly, the perpetrator of such cruelty turned out to be the seemingly ordinary gym employee. Crucially, that employee had been Paul's childhood bowling coach. To this day, whenever Paul sees a bowling ball, he immediately sees the killer's face. As Paul's story grew increasingly bizarre, they all thought he was making it up, which instantly killed his enthusiasm. Just as he was about to leave, a strange man suddenly appeared behind them. Seeing the man, they instantly became wary. Grimm quickly explains that he was just walking his dog in the mountains and happened to get caught up listening to Paul's story, then asks if he can join them. Jeff said it was a private gathering and politely declined. Seeing this, Grimm pulled out an object. This immediately changed Jeff and the others' attitude, and they quickly invited Grimm to join them. After brief introductions, Karen discovered Grimm was actually her university alumni. Paul watches the two chatting happily and starts to feel jealous. Bert noticed Paul's sour mood and changed the subject by proposing a bet. They would drink only alcohol, no water for the next few days, and the loser would treat everyone to a meal. This serves as a plot device. Had they strictly followed this rule, perhaps the ensuing tragedies could have been avoided. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the sky, and Grimm prepared to say goodbye to go home to sleep. But everyone felt they were getting along well with Grimm and urged him to stay to take shelter from the rain. Grimm said his home wasn't far from the mountain anyway, so he would take the dog home and then come back to join them. They waited a long time and finally heard a knock at the door, but the person standing outside was a stranger covered in red sores. This person was Henry, the man Bert had accidentally shot during the day, and to cover up his mistake, Bert, pretending to fear viral infection, decisively refused Henry entry. Jeff intended to call the police, but unfortunately his phone had no signal at that moment. While they were discussing a plan, Henry without a word got into their truck, deciding to drive alone to the hospital for treatment. Seeing this, they quickly rushed to stop him. Jeff grabbed a steel pitchfork and stabbed wildly at Henry, while Bert also fired a shot to scare him. Unexpectedly, the intense activity worsened Henry's condition dramatically, making him vomit blood all over the inside of the truck. Paul, seeing his beloved truck dirtied, swung a wooden club and beat Henry. Henry was quickly beaten until he couldn't fight back, staggering dizzily towards the two girls. The two girls were no pushovers either. They pulled out pepper spray and blinded Henry's eyes. Midway, Henry tried to explain something but was blocked again by Paul thrusting a torch in his face. Even more tragically, a sudden gust of wind blew the flames onto Henry, immediately burning him beyond recognition. After a few agonized screams, Henry vanished into the forest. Back in the cabin, Jeff felt very uneasy because he worried Henry running off might start a forest fire, and if the police investigated, it would be trouble for them. But Bert didn't care at all, saying it was raining outside and Henry would be soaked in no time. If the police really question us, we'll say Henry suddenly plunged into the flames during our bonfire party. Although they had a story ready, recalling the horrifying sight of Henry engulfed in flames, they still couldn't stop trembling inside. Time came to the next morning. Jeff and Bert prepared to go down the mountain to find someone to fix the truck, while Marcy asked Paul to stay behind and take care of Karen, as last night's events had left her emotionally shaken. Little did they know that last night Henry, trying to extinguish the flames on his body, had jumped into the river and accidentally drowned. And this river was the only water source around, with pipes by its bank directly connected to the young people's cabin. This meant the cabin's water supply was now contaminated by the corpse. Unaware, Paul, wanting to take care of Karen, fetched a cup of water from the cabin tap and gave it to her. Karen was deeply touched by this, and their relationship progressed further. The scene cuts to Jeff and Bert. They walked a long way and finally found a pig farm. A woman was butchering a pig, constantly cursing her deadbeat husband, complaining he played all night and didn't come home to help her work. Just as she was cursing fiercely, she finally noticed Jeff and Bert behind her. Since all her pigs were diseased, the woman was already in a bad mood and impatiently told them to buy pork elsewhere if that's what they wanted. Bert quickly explained their purpose. They weren't there to buy meat, but wanted to use her radio to call for car repairs. Realizing her mistake, the woman immediately changed her attitude and warmly invited them in to use it freely. But as soon as they stepped inside, Bert was drawn to a photo in the room. The woman's husband was Henry, the man they had accidentally killed with fire yesterday. Fearing their misdeeds would be exposed, they abandoned the idea of making a call, made up an excuse, and hastily left the place. Meanwhile, Marcy wasn't idle either. She rowed a boat to the upstream part of the river to see if anyone there could help fix the truck. Fortunately, there was indeed a house there, but just as she was about to enter, Jeff and Bert, on their way back to the cabin, also stumbled into this very house by accident. Unfortunately, it was empty, clearly abandoned for some time, and there was no communication equipment to be found. It seemed finding help here was basically hopeless.
I wonder if the cops know about it yet.
I doubt it. I mean, if they did know, they probably would have been in the cabin by now.
As Bert had suspected, a deputy soon knocked on the cabin door, questioning Paul about the gunshots heard the previous night. Paul cooperated fully, recounting the events of the day before accurately. He explained that a crazy man with a strange disease had suddenly broken into the cabin and tried to steal the truck, so they had no choice but to fire shots to scare him off. Deputy Winston, seeing the students acted in self-defense, didn't press for more details. Before leaving, he told Paul he would report the incident truthfully and promised help to tow the truck by tomorrow at the latest. Regarding the shooting, Winston would report it truthfully. Compensation for the truck would be handled after they caught the madman. Despite Winston projecting professionalism, Paul couldn't shake the feeling this person seemed unreliable. He had heard the gunshots last night, but only reported them today, and he arrived on a bicycle. Such carelessness made Paul doubt Winston's assurances. Still, they had managed to bluff their way through for now. After seeing Winston off, Paul and Bert hurriedly cleaned up the bloodstains. Otherwise, when the tow truck arrived tomorrow, they'd have to explain everything again. At the same time, Grim's dog appeared, but Bert looked around and saw no sign of Grim. Marcy, seeing the dog barking incessantly at them, felt something was wrong with it and fired a shot to scare it away. Soon after, they discussed what had happened in the room. The diseased pigs at the farm and yesterday's man covered in red sores seemed to be telling them all that a new virus was spreading on the mountain. Even the previously quiet dog had changed temperament. Grim was likely in grave danger now. Moreover, the deputy seemed unreliable. Waiting until the tow truck came tomorrow might mean they'd all be infected by then. It would be better to try fixing the truck themselves and leave this dangerous place as soon as possible. However, right after they said this, Karen suddenly felt dizzy and went to her room to rest. Seeing this, Paul seized the opportunity again and brought his beloved Karen another cup of water. Karen was touched by his constant attention, and her feelings for him grew stronger. She then invited Paul to lie down with her for a while, bringing them even closer. But just as Paul, overcome with passion, was moving his hand lower, he felt something sticky on Karen's leg. Looking closely, it was sticky, stringy blood. It turned out Karen hadn't been feeling well these past days because she had already been infected with the virus. Her thigh area had decayed badly. Paul was so frightened he immediately ran out of the room, and they first isolated Karen. Then everyone else took off their clothes and inspected each other. After confirming none of their companions were infected, they moved Karen to an outside shed, deciding to take turns staying with her through the night and sending her down the mountain for treatment first thing in the morning. Since Paul couldn't bear to see Karen suffering so much, he decided to go down the mountain to try his luck, hoping to find some painkillers or similar medicine. Fortunately, after some searching, he actually found a house with its lights on. This house was the very one Bert and the others had visited. Though empty during the day, by night it was brightly lit inside. Peering through the window, Paul saw a completely naked woman inside, kneeling by the bed and lighting candles. The innocent Paul had never seen such a tempting scene before, so he couldn't help but stare a little longer. He tried to explain that his friend was seriously ill and he only wanted to borrow a phone. But the man mistakenly thought he was a peeping Tom. Seeing he couldn't explain clearly, Paul had no choice but to turn and run away. Feeling ashamed for being mistaken as a pervert due to his poor explanation, Paul felt too embarrassed to tell his companions the truth and could only lie that he encountered a rabid dog while relieving himself. Worried that anyone going outside might bring back the virus, Jeff proposed a rule. From this moment on, no one was allowed to wander around unnecessarily, and companions must avoid physical contact to prevent cross-infection. To minimize infection risk as much as possible, they didn't dare eat even a bite of the food in their bags, resorting to simply drinking water to stave off hunger. The previous bet about drinking only alcohol for thirst was naturally canceled. Just then, they suddenly noticed Grimm's dog was frantically chewing at the shed door, isolating Karen. Luckily, Jeff fired a shot in time to scare it away. They spent the night like this, trembling with fear. By dawn, Bert had finally managed to fix the truck. Actually, the truck didn't have major problems to begin with. Henry had only smeared some blood on it, and they themselves had damaged other parts. But just as everyone was preparing to leave, Paul discovered Karen's condition had worsened to the point she couldn't walk. Bert also noticed something wrong. He had started coughing up blood constantly because of the water he drank last night, clearly showing Bert was now infected too. Fearing his companions would abandon him if they found out, he planned to hide his illness until they found a hospital. But just as they were helping Karen into the truck, she suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood onto the windshield. This sight terrified Jeff, who felt the truck was now contaminated by the virus and absolutely refused to get in. Moreover, judging by Karen's condition, she likely wouldn't survive the trip down the mountain. Hearing this, Bert also suggested abandoning Karen, but Marcy and Paul absolutely refused to abandon their companion. Seeing the disagreement, Paul could only have Bert drive down alone to call the police, while the others stayed behind to wait for help. While caring for Karen, Paul and Marcy inevitably came into contact with the blood on her body. So Jeff, to save his own life, decided to take 2 crates of beer and try to hitchhike on the road to quickly escape this dangerous place. He believed that once someone got sick, the others getting infected was only a matter of time. Before leaving, Jeff, mindful of their past relationship, kindly urged Marcy to flee for her life too. After settling Karen down, Paul and Marcy began chatting and, after a single glance at each other, couldn't resist getting intimate. Afterward, Paul went to the bathroom alone and, worried that Marcy might be infected too, used alcohol to disinfect himself. Marcy, meanwhile, indeed noticed something wrong with her body. Right after washing up, she saw red patches on her back. She had undoubtedly been infected too. Meanwhile, Bert drove down to the convenience store at the mountain's foot and urgently asked the owner, Tommy, for help. But because of the stolen chocolate incident, Tommy still held a grudge against Bert. When Tommy heard a virus was spreading on the mountain, he immediately ordered Bert to stand still while he went inside to call the police. Unexpectedly, the owner's son, Dennis, went berserk again, trying to devour Bert like a pancake. Dennis instantly bit through Bert's palm. Just like that, Dennis was also infected. Tommy, too late to stop it, was furious. His eldest son had died from some virus, and now his youngest was afflicted too. Tommy now directed all his anger towards Bert, then told the clerk to fetch the shotgun, intending to completely eliminate this source of infection. Meanwhile, Paul, still waiting for rescue, decided to try his luck by the river, hoping to encounter a passerby and borrow a phone. Unexpectedly, he discovered a foul-smelling corpse in the water, though it was face down. To confirm his suspicion, Paul picked up a stick and tried to turn the corpse over. The result was just as he suspected. The corpse was Henry, the man they had burned to death. Suddenly, Paul slipped and accidentally fell into the river, coming into intimate contact with the highly decomposed corpse. Now, he was successfully infected too. Paul also finally realized that Karen got infected because she drank the river water. Marcy's condition worsened too. While shaving her legs in the bathroom, she accidentally scraped off a layer of her own skin. Her body began decaying rapidly, with large amounts of pus oozing from her back. Unable to accept this, Marcy wanted to go outside to seek Paul's help. Grim's dog had been waiting for a long time. Smelling the blood on Marcy, the dog, which hadn't eaten for days, lunged wildly at her and ultimately tore Marcy apart. When Paul followed the sounds to the scene, fragments of Marcy's body were scattered everywhere. The dog then went to the shed to attack Karen. Noticing Paul arriving to investigate, it immediately charged at him. At the critical moment, Paul grabbed the shotgun beside him and narrowly escaped with his life. After it was over, Paul ran to the shed and found Karen's body completely mangled by bites, clearly beyond saving. Paul picked up a shovel nearby and helped Karen end her suffering. Paul was now fully lucid. Karen had clearly known she was infected, but still tricked him into being intimate, obviously wanting to drag someone down with her. After resolving everything, he packed his bags, took the gun, and prepared to head down the mountain, only to run into the injured Bert as soon as he opened the door. Bert, now letting his guard down, told Paul everything about being hunted by the convenience store owner. Paul felt Bert was going to die anyway, so he might as well make his death meaningful. When Tommy arrived, Paul first had Bert sit by the door as bait, then seized the moment to knock Andy down with a hammer. The fallen Andy instinctively fired his gun, and the shot happened to hit Tommy standing in the doorway. The sole surviving accomplice was terrified by the scene. As he reached for something to fight back, Paul killed him instantly with a screwdriver. Paul then set off to find Jeff, wanting to tell him the river was the source of the virus. But while passing a cave, Paul noticed a flicker of light inside. He moved closer to investigate but tripped over something and fell. Looking up, he saw Grim's corpse, his internal organs completely hollowed out. Not daring to linger, Paul followed a small path straight down the mountain and soon saw the car Tommy had arrived in. Since he hadn't found his companions, Paul had no choice but to escape alone. Unfortunately, he soon became disoriented and crashed head-on into a deer, completely wrecking the car. Then the sound of music caught his attention. Paul followed it and found Deputy Winston. Paul's intuition was correct. Deputy Winston clearly had no intention of helping, lamely claiming he had sent a tow truck that broke down, and a second one was on the way. Clearly, he was just making things up, but the urgent matter was still how to get out of this place. Just then, the sheriff's voice came over the radio. The police had discovered the carnage at the cabin and confirmed the young people, including Paul, carried the virus. Seeing Deputy Winston hesitate, a young man nearby trying to stop the virus spread swung a guitar at Paul. But Paul dodged, and the guitar struck the man's friend instead. Everyone at the party started fleeing in panic, but they already had Paul's blood on them. Only Deputy Winston started shouting curses at Paul. Paul didn't waste words and knocked him out cold with a stick. With nowhere else to go, Paul stumbled onto a main road just as a large truck approached. But Paul was completely exhausted and collapsed onto the ground. When he woke again, he found himself in a hospital bed, with the sheriff who gave the shoot order also present. Just as Paul thought he was finally saved, doctors informed him the town's medical facilities were too basic to cure this virus, requiring immediate transfer to a major hospital. The massive viral outbreak inevitably worried the sheriff about his retirement, so he secretly ordered Winston to take Paul somewhere isolated and deal with him. As for Jeff, from the group, he had merely passed out drunk in the woods. When Jeff returned to the forest cabin, he finally grasped the severity of the situation. But realizing he was the sole survivor, Jeff didn't show excessive grief. Instead, he felt a sense of elation at having cheated death. It turned out the sheriff had sent men to burn the bodies at the cabin, where they coincidentally found the triumphant Jeff. The police then burned all the bodies, believing this would completely eliminate the virus. Unbeknownst to them, townspeople were still drawing water from the river. Upstream from where two children fetched water was precisely the spot where the deputy had dealt with Paul. Unaware of the danger, the little girl used the virus-laden water to make drinks, selling them for 5 cents a cup at a roadside stand. Wanting to encourage the children, the sheriff and his deputies each bought a cup. Their fate was sealed. And with that, the movie ends.